Hello, and welcome to Clear Conversations, Closing the Experience Gap, the impact of COVID-19 on financial services brand experiences. This one in partnership with our friends from the Financial Services Forum. My name is Geraint Jones, and I'm Clare M&C Saatchi's Global Marketing Director. And I'm going to start with some housekeeping. It's great to see some old friends and some new ones joining us from brands like Barclays, Western Union, HSBC, Prudential, Legal & General, Visa, Close Brothers, Citi, and many more. We're also streaming this session live on LinkedIn for the first time, so a warm welcome to our audience there too. As an attendee, I should say that your camera and microphone are automatically off, and you will not be able to turn them on accidentally, so you can completely relax. It's just the panelists who have to be scared. This session is being recorded and we'll share it with attendees and those who couldn't make it early next week. So watch out for an email from my colleagues Saskia or Gary in your inbox in the coming few days. For updates about future conversations and to watch recordings of this and other conversations from the past, please visit clearstrategy.com/the-new-normal. The link will be in the comments box in a moment, or follow us at Clare M&C Saatchi on LinkedIn. Again, the link will be in the comments box. Should you wish to ask a question, please use the Q&A function in the bar at the bottom of your screen. And please start your question with the name of the panelist you'd like to answer. For example, John, and then your question. I think that gives us all of the practicalities. So we're now going to get on with the show. So I'll just do a quick introduction to who we are. We are Clare. We're the strategy consulting arm of M&C Saatchi. And as such, the crisis we've been going through has had a pretty polarizing impact on our business. It's being felt very differently by every sector and every country and every business within every sector. And we know that, for example, restaurants and airlines have been hit extremely hard, but actually financial services in some respects have seen a real increase in demand for their services and increase in demand for their experiences. So as a result, we took the decision very early on to invest right at the beginning of the crisis in some additional proprietary research to understand how people's expectations around brand experience had shifted during and because of the crisis. Using data from our proprietary 2018 Global Experience Gap study as a comparator, we've then been able to identify some key changes in consumer expectations around brand experience in financial services, which we'll be checking up on again in the last quarter of this year. Today, my colleague John Riley will share some of the key findings from that research conducted in May this year before we debate some of those questions raised with our panel. And I'm delighted to welcome from Western Union Business Solutions, Nicole Zimmerman, who is their head of customer and marketing. Born in Germany, Nicole first began her career as a consultant at Deutsche Telekom Consulting, and over the next 20 years would go on to work with T-Mobile and Western Union in Europe and the US. In 2011, Nicole relocated to Denver, Colorado, and took on a newly created role to lead the global marketing strategy planning and new customer segment development team. And more recently, she joined Global Payments Business Unit as head of customer and marketing to manage the global customer marketing and communications teams who are responsible for driving strategic segment marketing and customer experience programs, activities, and campaigns. We're also joined by Will Kingston. Will is head of customer experience at Close Brothers, a FTSE 250 UK merchant bank. Will started his career as a corporate lawyer in Australia before moving into management consulting, where he consulted for a range of financial services companies across Australia and Southeast Asia. Prior to joining Close Brothers, Will helped establish the first digital bank in Thailand and ran the customer operations function for a fast-growing London insurtech. Away from the office, after failing at dozens of lockdown self-improvement activities, Will has turned his hand to writing, so you can recently see his published articles in The Spectator in Australia. And finally, from Clare M&C Saatchi, John Riley. John co-leads the financial services practice at Clare, and prior to joining us, John worked at Profit, where he helped clients such as MetLife, Swiss Re, Anglo American, and Samsung develop impactful strategies to drive differentiation, relevance, and growth. In his spare time, John can be found trying out restaurants and recipes and obsessing over his latest political views, which he shares as the co-host of the politics podcast, The Special Relationship. And we're finally joined by Helen Danzey from our partners at the Financial Services Forum. Helen's going to say a few words of welcome before John then sets the scene with a short presentation. Over to you, Helen.
Thanks very much, Geraint. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. And a big thank you to our friends over at Clare M&C Saatchi for all the work they've done on this. They've actually done all the heavy lifting, I have to say, but we're always delighted. We've worked with them quite a bit in the past. We love working with them And for those of you who don't know us, the Financial Services Forum is a membership organisation for marketers working in financial services, but across the board. And we run a lot of events. Our aim is to help you guys do your job better if we humanly can, to inform you, to help you innovate, to generally stir things up, and also sow some of the best thought leadership from out of sector thinking and what's happening elsewhere. So a huge warm welcome to you all. If you don't, if you want to know more about us, you can find out about our events on the Financial Services Forum website. And without further ado, over to John to take you into the meat of the presentation. Enjoy yourselves.
Thanks, Helen, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm just going to share a couple of slides because I think the fun part will definitely be getting into the questions with the panelists. But as Geraint mentioned, we recently have commissioned some new research checking in on the experience gap. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today is some recent research that we've done to help define how clients can help bridge that experience gap. And really kind of quantify sort of how brands are living up to the promises that they make in the marketplace. I think we can all agree that COVID-19 has changed the world, and financial services are definitely no exception there. And there's a new context for both consumers and customers, as well as financial services firms themselves. From a consumer perspective, consumers are being squeezed from all sides. They expect their personal finances to be impacted. They're pessimistic about the future state of the economy, and unemployment is definitely set to rise as government stimulus begins to fade. And really, they're just concerned about getting by and making sure that their financial futures for themselves and their families are going to be more certain. And as we think about financial services firms themselves, the context is similarly chaotic. We've seen rapid changes in consumer behaviors, which we'll get into in a bit more detail on some of the later slides, but all around the rapid pace of digital transformation. At the same time, there are going to be fewer people resources around to help deliver those experiences. Lots of banks, I think HSBC is probably the poster child for this, announcing 35,000 jobs are going to be made redundant globally. And then to top it all off, especially on this side of the pond, even before the crisis, the cost of capital returns was way too high and it was difficult to find income. And that's just going to become increasingly the case, and making it very difficult to invest in the experience to meet these changing customer demands. So bringing this back to the experience gap, we do believe that the key question for marketers to understand is how the promises they make are matched by the experiences they deliver. So I'm going to share with you some findings and implications from a series of research studies that we've conducted to diagnose this experience gap, as we call it, and point the way to how clients might bridge that gap. So in 2018, we sized the gap for the first time. We did a big global study with about 30,000 consumers in the US, UK, Germany, and China. Earlier this year, before COVID-19 struck, we actually spoke to many CMOs, chief customer officers, and CEOs about strategies to close that gap. And you can find that research at clearstrategy.com. And during the crisis, we thought we'd check in on two of the sectors that we thought would be most impacted by COVID-19, retail and financial services. Everyone loves a ranking, and we're no exception. So in this data, we have some information about how brands' gaps have changed over time in the context of this crisis or more broadly. But that's not what I think is going to be most interesting for those of you who actually weren't tested specifically in that study. So what we're really going to be digging into is how consumers' behaviors have changed, as well as their needs and expectations from financial services firms. So what have we seen? We've kind of summarized our findings in four major shifts. So we see that consumers are changing the way that they engage with brands during and after the crisis. What they actually care about in terms of sort of the utility that they want from brands is also changing. Consumer expectations from business more broadly in terms of their role in society is also changing. And then finally, just the pace of transformation, both in terms of consumer behavior, but also how we and all of our jobs have had to change so quickly, is also one of the key shifts that we think is really important to highlight here. In terms of where consumers engage, you've probably noticed this in your own life, but COVID has really accelerated the move away from in-person interactions in financial services to digital. So in banking specifically, in our study, we see an increase in app and website usage of 45% versus our 2018 data. And a study from Virgin Money, at least in the UK, shows that this behavior is likely to persist, with 83% of consumers saying that they will continue to use digital banking after the crisis. And I think it's important to say that B2B financial services have also had to adapt quickly in a world of Zoom meetings and webinars and digital engagement to make sure that they're continuing to reach those customers. So what does it mean? We think that this means that you have to continue to deliver a distinctive brand experience in a predominantly digital environment. Obviously, the question around sort of balancing investment across those channels has always been something that's been a challenge, but sort of getting that balance right, I think, is going to be increasingly important in the coming months. And then I think, sort of controversially, sort of is omnichannel really the right approach for you should be, I think, a question that marketers and business leaders are asking themselves. Should we be omnichannel, or should we really be thinking sort of digital first in terms of our experience? So in the context of banking, should it all be about that single digital account opening process, even if customer is visiting a branch? I think a good example of a brand that gets this right is Oscar, which is a hybrid kind of tech company and health insurer in the US. And they deliver a really branded experience that's very distinctive, primarily through digital channels. They set out with the goal of creating a patient experience that's like having a doctor in the family by providing access to care when needed, and also helping their patients navigate the complex healthcare system in the US. With the app as really that front door, that primary portal to care. Via the app, you can do everything using a virtual concierge to help you navigate all the different points of care and get the services that you need. And I think if financial services firms were to sort of adopt some of those learnings, some of those experiences would be very distinct from what we see in the marketplace today. The second shift around sort of what consumers care about, it's really interesting because we looked at the top needs that consumers claim they value from financial services brands. And in that top 10, and we asked around 25 or so in this battery of questions, they're really clustered into three categories, which I think on first glance seem very straightforward, but upon second glance are actually quite telling around the mindset of consumers these days. So those buckets are a straightforward experience. So things like straightforward and transparent when providing information, being easy to deal with, and quick and simple processes. But the second is around just being a good corporate citizen. So how can we sort of protect our customers' data and security, for example? And then finally, reliability and trust is sort of rounds out this top 10 in terms of what consumers are looking for. So simply being a brand that can be relied upon, being fair to your customers, and being on your customer side are the things that are standing out. I think it's really interesting to see what's not there, right? So things like sort of the most innovative products and solutions, personalization or sort of premium offers were things that were kind of falling out of this top 10 as we looked at this data. Which paints a really interesting picture of the consumers. A good example, I think, of what this means is the fact that we should be focusing our innovation around propositions, around providing that practical, pragmatic value to your customers and consumers. Propositions that really kind of meet the moment in a straightforward way. I think Starling Bank, which is a UK-based digital bank for consumers and businesses, is doing a really good job of capitalizing on this in the moment. Just last week, they launched something called the Business Toolkit, which is a service which can be added to their free business account for limited companies and sole traders for just £7 a month. And it includes tools that are going to help these small and medium-sized enterprises get back on track as the UK emerges from the lockdown. It helps them do things like create and send invoices, automate expenses, record VAT, and connects to HMRC to submit VAT returns. So really taking a lot of that hassle so that these small business owners can really focus on getting their businesses back up and running. In terms of what consumers expect from business, we see that that's also shifting. So I mentioned in the previous slide that trust was really important in that top 10, but more broadly, as we look at sort of those factors that are rising, it's those things like being reliable, being straightforward with information, being fair, being transparent, and also making a positive contribution to society. Some of those declining factors are things like solving things as quickly as possible, speaking to a person when needed, rewarding loyal customers, and also personalization. So I think this really is interesting as we think about how it's showing that company purpose is going to be squarely in the center of what your strategy should be focused on. And lofty purpose statements aren't really enough, right? They need to be backed up by actions at the core of the business, not just from a CSR perspective or from a marketing campaign point of view. So we think that this creates a major opportunity for FS firms, but it's not without risk, right? So we think you need to be clear about your purpose and what it means in the context of this crisis, and back it up with words and deeds. And this is evident, not just in terms of the COVID response, but as we think about sort of broader society, the shifts in public opinion as it relates to the Black Lives Matter movement, I think shows that these expectations are constantly changing, and firms, and financial services firms are no different, are going to be held to account. And you can see from some of the examples on the right of this slide that FS firms have really created some high expectations for themselves that they're going to have to deliver in the coming months. And then finally, the fourth shift is really about the pace of transformation. So this isn't really coming from the data in the study, but I'm sure we can all relate that the pace of transformation has accelerated. Across industries, markets, walks of life, we've all adapted behavior very quickly. And generally speaking, I think we've been quite successful. I think this should be a testament that Agile isn't really just a buzzword anymore, but it's really possible and increasingly required to meet the needs of customers. So what does this mean? I think it means that Agile innovation is achievable, that perceived barriers are really going away. And it requires that clear priorities and widespread internal support from the top and the bottom are there to really drive that transformation. I like to end on a high note. And if you don't recognize the photo on the right-hand side here, this is from the Nightingale Hospital that was built in the UK in March and April of this year to meet the demands of the crisis. I think back in February when in Wuhan, China built a hospital in 6 days, everyone thought that was something only that could be done in China. But the fact that we were able to do it over here in the West, I think, is a testament to our resilience. And I think the resilience of the FS sector and consumers more broadly shows that we can meet this moment. So I encourage all of us to kind of meet these challenges, challenge some of those preconceived notions, and truly innovate to stay ahead of consumers who will increasingly expect this as we think about going forwards. So that's all that I had to present. So thank you, and I'll hand it back over to Geraint to start the Q&A.
Thank you, John. I thought it was really interesting. So I'm going to open to the panel now, and could I ask all of you to come off mute if you're on mute at this point? I'm going to start. With you, Nicole, actually, if that's okay. I've got a quote from a gentleman called Mark Evans, who's the managing director of marketing and digital at Direct Line Insurance here in the UK, and he says, "What everyone is waking up to is that the fusion between brand marketing and customer experience, particularly in the service sector, is critical." So the question, Nicole, is, was COVID the wake-up call that the FS sector really needed?
Thank you. Thank you, Geraint. That's a great question and a great quote as well. Definitely, we have seen an acceleration of change happening during the pandemic. And what that was founded on is really the access of consumers to their services had dramatically changed. So the shift to digital and online definitely has been shedding more of a light on the the criticality of customer experience in the digital and online space. So the websites, your performance of your websites, the information you share on your websites has become critical, but also because we have as a workforce shifted to work from home. The business continuity plans had been put to a real stress test, really figuring out how are you having your sales force, in our case from a B2B perspective, operating from home. How are you ensuring that your operations team can work from home, processing payments and transactions, you know, to ensure really that the money and the payments are reaching where they are supposed to reach. And so I think the focus on the agility of the business model and shorter development times in terms of your products and services, and John had some great examples in his presentation, definitely has accelerated the change and shortened the period of what is acceptable actually in terms of customer experience and what you need to provide to your consumer or to your business customer base. And I think also that it is highlighting why customer experience becomes really a critical component of brand marketing. Because if this is the only way you can reach your clients and you can't create a retail or branch experience any longer, then you need to think about, you know, how you translate this type of experience into the virtual world, you know, and make it digital and make it online accessible. And so definitely, I think he might be right on saying that this has accelerated the change that was probably ongoing, but far too slow. And now we are, with the agile methodologies, really forced to become faster to market with ideas, propositions, products, and services for the customers and clients.
It gives us a real sense of the kind of complexity, I guess, that you're faced with in an organization the size of Western Union when faced with a crisis like this. Will, talk to me a little bit about your similar challenges at Close Brothers. You must have been busier than you've ever been.
Thanks, Geraint. We are, and I might add, it wouldn't be a lockdown meeting or call if there wasn't at least one "you are on mute" quote coming out in the on the call. We have been very busy, and it has been a wake-up call for us. It's been a wake-up call for the financial services industry more generally. I'm not convinced it is the wake-up call that the financial services industry really needs, though. Nicole was spot on. There's been some really positive developments over the last 3 or 4 months around the adoption of digital, and particularly from companies that were previously reticent to adopt digital channels. There's been a shift in sales and service models. Close Brothers is pivoting very quickly to a remote sales model out of necessity, and that's something which I think would have been very unlikely 6 months ago. But if we're honest with ourselves, I think these changes are still primarily being driven from a cost lens, or being looked at under a cost lens, which is entirely natural when you go into a downturn. And I completely understand the instinctive response of leaders across financial services to look to cut costs at this stage. I'm not hearing as much around how we're thinking about the value proposition of banking. And this is a conversation which we need to be having at this moment in time more than ever. My view is that retail banking is on a slow march to becoming commoditized very, very quickly, unless we go from a position of offering products and services to actually trying harder to address customer needs. You know, how do we go from a position of offering home loans to actually helping people move house? How do we go from a position of offering loans to small businesses to helping them run their businesses better? I think this is the type of conversation we need to be having at the moment. I think you're seeing this in pockets from some of the fintechs. I think you're seeing that story play out in China to an extent. But most of the retail banks in the UK, in the US, in my home country of Australia, are still very product and service oriented. And as a result of that, that's the reason why customers have traditionally distrusted banks and insurers, because they don't feel they're getting that value from them above and beyond the core product. Something which we're thinking a lot about at the moment is how do we use this crisis as an opportunity to reframe the value we offer to our customers? How do we, as a business bank, go from offering loans, go from offering insurance products to actually being the architect of that end-to-end customer journey and actually helping them with that core customer need? That, I think, is the conversation we need to be having at the moment. And I think in conjunction with the conversation around digital and around kind of cost efficiencies is where we need to have our heads up.
Thank you. I think I'll follow up to that, actually, because it's interesting that you say it's not really even the wake up that the sector needs, but I'm also conscious that some of the sector has moved faster than some other parts of the sector to make this transformation happen. And you know, the significance of the transformation in the banking space, for example, can't be kind of ignored. I guess the percentages I think I have in the back of my head were something like 50% of the UK populace with a bank account had used digital services prior to the crisis, and that jumped to 80% very, very quickly through lockdown, which enormously changes your perspective on how you use branches, for example. But not everybody has those burning platforms, right? So pensions and investments and money management, they haven't been forced yet to kind of evolve their experiences. Do you think they're going to be forced to play catch up because of sort of the rising tide effect?
Yes, I do, but I actually don't think they should be thinking about playing catch up to the retail banking sector. They should be thinking about playing catch up to leading technology companies across industries. I think you'll find now that customers aren't comparing banks against banks and insurers against insurers. They're comparing the experience they have with a bank with the most recent digital experience they had anywhere. And that could be on Deliveroo, it could be an Uber trip, it could be, you know, in the iTunes store. Something which I consistently tell my team when we're doing things like competitor analysis is we need to start comparing ourselves to the Facebooks of this world, to the Ubers of this world, in part because they're leading in terms of digital experience, but also because it's inevitable that those companies will be entering the financial services space and already are. That's kind of the benchmark we need to set ourselves. So if I was running a pensions fund, or if I was running an investment bank, I'd be thinking less about trying to catch up to Barclays, and I'd be thinking more about how do we catch up to Uber.
That's entirely fair. I think we're often asked by our clients, you know, who should we be benchmarking? And honestly, it's not the financial services sector's fault. It's actually just the fault of the speed with which, particularly the FANGs, can innovate and change experience quickly. I guess my concern is, and I'll come to you, Nicole, on this if that's all right. The extent to which the experience in B2B, in a world of these sort of identikit Zoom webinars, which is one of what we're on right now, the lack of in-person events, which previously were a huge kind of baseline for sales and marketing, and this sort of fully remote sales and marketing organization management, which you were touching on in the first question that we asked you. How do you create a really kind of modern B2B FS experience in that context?
I think it becomes even more important to focus on information and content. So I think the pandemic has also really helped us understand how critical good information actually is to make decisions. And I think this is in your personal life as an impact of the pandemic, but it is also definitely informing how, for example, B2B marketing needs to look at it. In our case, you know, a huge proportion of our go-to-market is definitely around in-person events like conferences and trade shows. This has been ripped away from us completely since earlier this year. And so it was really important to understand, you know, how can we stay in contact with our client base? How can we reach out in this environment even to new prospects to really help still our business and help our clients to really continue to, you know, adapt in this situation. And so it starts from the simple things of experience to pick up the phone. I mean, we heard from our customers a lot about, you know, oh my God, my bank trader is not available. I'm so glad that you are able to pick up the phone and be here with me and help me through figuring out how am I paying my bills still internationally if I still have to the opportunity to run my business, import, export, whatever it is. So I think in these circumstances, content is king and stays king, but good information, and I think John highlighted that as well, informed content is really critical. And so putting out, you know, even content that is guiding, business customers through this pandemic. When you think about importers and exporters, you know, the market is so uncertain, the volatilities are so high. So how are you giving a sense of security? How are you giving even a sense of calmness in this uncertainty to guide your customers through this and help making the right decisions? So B2B marketing becomes even more customized, you know, even closer to the customer base, understanding, you know, how to help through it. And I agree with Will. It's probably not 100% the wake-up call that we need, but I think customers, consumers, clients are getting used to this very easy digital online interaction model, and that will determine of how then marketing really needs to shape the experience and the approach. So I think it's a great opportunity for all of us as marketeers to look at, you know, what is the next thing here in the area of digital customer experience and marketing. So yeah, I think content and information becomes critical.
Thank you, Nicole. I think it's a really interesting point, because I think I was talking to Pete Markey, the CMO of TSB, I think in sort of December time last year, which feels like a decade ago. So much has changed. And Pete was saying to me the thing that he was most worried about was if we do all rush headlong into digital, to the in effect at the expense of a human kind of interactive experience driven through physical events, or driven through physical branches, or driven through a physical interaction with somebody speaking down the phone at a call center, we will find ourselves very quickly in an arms race of, you know, digital widgets and sort of bits of programming in apps being the thing that are the distinctive elements of your brand. And that just becomes a function of the size of your development team and the speed with which you can get developments to market. John, in that context, how do you create a distinctive brand where you potentially have everything looking the same from an experience perspective?
It's a really good question, and I think it's going to be increasingly kind of one of the biggest challenges, especially that the retail banks will have to deal with. I mean, I think there are a couple things that I would say about driving that distinctiveness, and it goes back to something that Will and Nicole was saying around, it's not just about innovating for innovation's sake and or just putting everything in digital, but it's actually being needs focused and thinking about the value that you're actually adding to those customers. If everyone thinks about how to make a process as quick as possible, then we're going to have a bunch of apps that get us through the funnel very quickly, and there's going to be no differentiation. But if you think about different ways that you can serve the needs of customers, probably more broadly than you are today, then I think you will end up with the brand and product and service experience. It's going to be more differentiated. I think a big part of this is going to be leveraging things like open banking to create these ecosystems and partnerships that reduce friction for consumers, but also enable you rather to sort of meet a broader set of needs and become more indispensable. And I think there's definitely going to be a big first mover advantage for whoever can kind of crack that nut. The last thing that I would say on that point as well is let's not forget kind of brand personality. Even just thinking of all of the ride-hailing apps that we have now, we have Captain, Ola, Uber here in the UK, that all are essentially providing the same service with a slightly different price point. But I think Ola actually does a good job of communicating with you in an engaging way. It makes you feel different when you engage. And so as we think about these sort of digital experiences and not want to become a commodity, I think the role that brand personality can come to play is going to be a really critical factor there as well.
You mentioned actually when you were talking about the sort of consumer desire for greater utility, and you've just talked about utilities. I'm going to come back to you on that. I guess the question I have around that is if consumers are looking for utility right now, at what point is it right for brands to say, well, actually, we've created a very useful set of services right now, and now we can start to add in additional elements of personality to kind of get ahead of that need as it comes back into the market to make our brand distinctive, so that we just don't get trapped into a price war or a feature war?
Yeah, I guess I would challenge the premise of the question slightly, which is to say that I don't think personality and utility are in conflict, right? So I think if you have a really clear sense of the value that you're providing for that customer need, for example, I think Betterment is a US example that does a really good job of saying investments are kind of complicated, the interfaces that I have from competitors are cumbersome, and the prices are too much. And they said, hey, there's a need here. They put a need around it. And then they create a distinctive brand that's sort of calm and personable, that fits that. So I would say that your brand personality and the sort of value proposition that you're fundamentally providing should be things that work together in concert and should really give you more runway rather than less from a personality perspective.
So, Will, what's your perspective on this? I mean, do you feel like, I mean, Close has such a history. You've been around for such a long time. The people who bank with Close Brothers, I guess they kind of know why they're banking with you already. How are you kind of translating that, I guess, Close Brothers-ness into the digital service layer?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the first observation I would make is you've got to be honest with yourself as a business as to what your brand really is. I think as customer experience and marketing professionals, I think we all have a temptation to go, we want to be the sexiest, coolest, most whiz-bang kid on the block. Close Brothers is never going to be Monzo. You know, we are a 150-year-old business bank with a completely different demographic that we try and target. And that's something we're really realistic about. I think the problem for a lot of brands at the moment comes when they have this sort of purpose overreach where they try and be the kind of the cool kid, when really a lot of companies just have to do what they say they're going to do on the tin. So for us, our three pillars around experience are around service, expertise, and relationships. And for us, it's about getting those things right. Now, does digital play a component in that? Absolutely it does. But for us, it's about looking at the end-to-end customer journey and going, well, what are those sorts of high-value interactions where we think a human engagement is still important? And particularly in business banking, there is no doubt that is the case. But then where are the lower value interactions where you probably can minimize human engagement and automate and shift towards unassisted channels? So an exercise which we're going through at the moment, and we go through all the time, is looking at that journey and going, well, what are the opportunities, or what are those particular moments where speaking to someone on the phone or having a conversation with one of our experts remains critically important? And then what's an administrative low value task which we could potentially automate? And so I think it's the conversation shouldn't be, well, let's move towards digital or let's stay as a face-to-face service proposition. It should be, what are the parts of your journey which you should look to automate, and what are the parts which are high value which you potentially can keep that human engagement?
I think that's really interesting. I guess a small follow-up to that is, and has COVID and the crisis changed any of your preconceptions about what was low value pre-crisis that maybe has become more high value now? I mean, you can say no, but
no, it's done two things. Number one, it's certainly accelerated the drive towards automating lower value interactions, and that's just the cost constrained environment that we are currently operating in. The second thing is it's actually forced us to reconsider how we are training our front line and how we're thinking about our front line. So particularly dealing with vulnerable customers and distressed customers. Most of our call center each day is our agents are speaking with customers who are under severe emotional and psychological pain. And many of them haven't been trained to be able to deal with kind of that particular level of emotional distress. So I think for us, it's with our human engagement, how can we give our people the tools, which may not be digital tools, it may be training around softer skills to help them with really, really difficult conversations, which are certainly taking place now. And I think, unfortunately, there will be really hard conversations with customers for some time to come.
I'm going to follow up with that to Nicole, actually. I guess you probably have amongst us the biggest team to manage, and you also have the biggest influence on, I guess, a series of teams right down to the customer front line. How are you reorienting and retraining your internal teams at Western Union and your frontline staff, I guess, to deliver not only better digital experience, but just better experience within these sort of COVID-driven resource constraints that Will's touching on?
Yeah, I think from a Western Union perspective, when you think about our consumer part of the business and those clients, they definitely had the biggest challenge in terms of having simply access to the service because, you know, of the lockdown of all the countries across the world. So it was really critical and important to not only innovate from a product perspective and find new ways of giving them access to our services, which we invented a digital location instead of the retail location. We drove more of innovation around home delivery to really make sure that people stay safe while they are still able to send and receive money. And in that case, we are working closely, obviously, with our agents to really understand how can we equip them to make it still further safe and keep it safe, not only for their employees, but also for our consumers. And on the business side, as I said, it's the complete shift to digital and online has definitely also highlighted that, you know, it is all about empowering our employees and really making them own this type of customer experience and allowing them to really interact with the clients. I totally agree with Will. It's a lot about empathy and flexibility at these critical times where, you know, you can't just operate off of a process sheet and say, okay, this was originally the process and now we continue. So you need to have that flexibility, understanding what has happened when you think about a small business that has imported goods from China. The supply chain has broken. What the whole business is at risk, and so how are you giving the you know, the support? You know, in this case, Western Union decided to look into actually starting to lend money, even if we are only in parts of our business a bank, but not everywhere worldwide, lending money to our clients through government relief programs that were available and are available to really support them. So I think, you know, this was a change for our employees as well. You know, what are these new services or products and propositions that we can offer? So I think it goes hand in hand, you know, the flexibility of finding new ways of reaching out to customers and staying on top of their needs and understanding what has shifted for them, and then making sure that our people are empowered or trained. If there is a gap in knowledge, then definitely also making sure that we are increasing, you know, skill sets and knowledge, but first and foremost, actually being able to empower them to deal with our clients in these difficult situations and have the flexibility to find solutions that are maybe more creative and not standardized like we are used to operate, you know. So I think that's what is really critical during this pandemic and even after the pandemic in the recovery.
So let's talk a little bit about after the pandemic then. John, I'm going to come to you next. We've heard a lot about purpose. We've heard a lot about trust. We've heard a lot about brand experience. We've all seen right at the beginning of the crisis the piano tracked adverts with the stock footage that were all basically the same advert. So we've all just melded the brands together. I guess my question is, there is a sort of a bit of concern around purpose within our marketing community about how we use it effectively as a business tool. And I think my question is, do you think it's crucial for businesses to use purpose to guide choices around brand and experience as they manage not only COVID, but actually the coming recession? You know, to be good actors, particularly in financial services, must be quite important.
Absolutely, and Geraint, you know this is my bugbear. I think the words purpose and campaign should never even end up in the same sentence. Purpose should be driving strategic decision making, especially in a crisis, right? So I think the example that Nicole gave is exactly aligned with the purpose of Western Union. How can we get our customers and clients moving money better, right? I think that when it comes to the idea of purpose, it should be about what is our role in society? What is the value that we create beyond value to our shareholders? And how can we use that as the kind of guiding light to say, what is the way that we can do something new, do something differently that's going to meet the needs of this challenge? You're absolutely right that this didn't begin as a financial crisis, but it's quickly becoming a financial crisis. And so financial services organizations are going to be, we're going to require them to kind of step up and start to meet some of these new needs in new and innovative ways. And I think that will come through partnerships with government, with government programs, things of that nature, but also thinking about new products and propositions that are aligned with delivering that purpose. And I just want to tie it back to this question about distinctiveness. Your company purpose should be guiding sort of what those new propositions are that are going to keep you differentiated and distinctive in the minds of all of your stakeholders. So I think all of these conversations ultimately should be coming back to purpose, especially in the context of this crisis.
Will, do you agree? Is it something that should be driving decision making at Close Brothers?
I absolutely agree. I think it should be driving decision making everywhere. I think the challenge for financial services organisations is the disconnect between the purpose on the poster in the kitchen and then how it actually leads to change occurring. So this is what I kind of call operationalizing your purpose. We're very happy to say we've got this lovely flowery purpose, but a lot of the time there aren't the mechanisms in place day to day to be able to make sure that's reflected in what you're doing. So practical examples, right? When you're kicking off a project, are you actually having a conversation around your purpose and how this enables that? And if a project isn't directly enabling your purpose, are you deprioritizing that in favor of one that is? Are you having conversations with your frontline call center agents around how you can help communicate your purpose effectively? Are you having your purpose embedded into training programs? Are you having your purpose embedded into your review processes? I think these are all the mechanical things which are really hard to do. This is operational stuff. And I think we as customer experience professionals and as marketers need to think of ourselves less as just selling the line and more as kind of almost proxy chief operating officers. How do we actually embed that purpose into what we're doing? Because if we don't do that, then it's empty promises, and that's kind of what has got the financial services industry into trouble in the first place.
Yeah, I like that answer. I think it's a good illustration of the opportunity I think that's available. Nicole, do you see? I mean, John just said, what your response has been to actually use your purpose to drive decision making to benefit your customers. Do you see that as being more of a case? Has purpose become more valuable as a currency inside Western Union to help guide business decisions?
So I have to say, I mean, purpose is at the core of what Western Union is doing. And that's why, I'm very proud to work for a company like Western Union, because moving money for better, as John just quoted, is not only our brand promise slogan in our advertising, but it is actually really determining of how we are operating. And at the core, we have also a very strong foundation that is actually working, alongside the business to, figure out how are we helping beyond even moving money, and the pandemic has definitely accelerated that. We had very early in the process in March put out actually from our foundation a challenge to our agents and to our business customers to help us match actually $1 million pledge to really get money collected to help countries and companies that are impacted and consumers that are impacted by the pandemic. And specifically from a business solution, again, coming back to importing, exporting, the business space, the payment space, we were able to support some of our clients that, for example, one of the biggest UK logistics companies, Jack's UFS, was trying to import actually 1 million masks for the NHS to enable them to have the proper protection equipment. And these are things where we are actually able to walk the talk. We are not only doing business with a logistics company, but we are enabling something that speaks to the purpose. And our CEO just recently in a webinar actually like this about global trade quoted, when money moves, good things happen. And I think that's definitely something that that Western Union definitely is at the core of our DNA. So I would love to see more of the financial service industry to actually think about their values and how they can actually bring them more into that day-to-day thinking about the customer experience. And I think also back to your question, that consumers and business customers will request this. I think this pandemic has also changed probably a little bit the view of people for critical topics like diversity and inclusion, like climate change. So people will expect from a company to have answers to these type of social responsibility questions. And so purpose becomes really, really critical.
I think it's a really interesting point to jump into our last couple of questions, because I think for me at least, 2008 was probably, let's agree, the nadir for the financial services sector in terms of trust, in terms of its reputation in the wider world. I think there's probably an opportunity here. If you kind of follow through the arguments that this panel's making, it's an opportunity for financial services as a sector, but also as individual brands, to really demonstrate some leadership, to support the wider economy, to help their customers properly, and to finally sort of rehabilitate its reputation in the eyes of the wider population. Would you say that's true, John? Is this a real, you try and find opportunities in a crisis. Is this the opportunity for financial services?
Absolutely. I think to your point, I think we can all agree that the 2008, the sort of financial services sector was at fault in terms of creating that crisis. That's not the case here, right? So it's a completely different world. And I think, the studies have shown that FS companies have begun to build back that trust over time. But I think this crisis is absolutely an opportunity for financial services companies to really step up and sort of demonstrate that they're a positive actor in society. I think you've already seen some small examples of this. I think in the US, some of the kind of small and more regional banks have done a really good job of getting federal funds out to people quickly. In Europe, there are good examples of some of the bigger banks proactively saying, providing mortgage repayment holidays to customers before the government forced them to. So I do think that you're starting to see this become more consistent. But I think if there's one brand that really stands out as having really made some tough choices that actually were to the benefit of society, their customers, their communities, and their colleagues, I think that will go a long way in terms of positive dividends after the crisis.
Your perspective on this from a Close Brothers point of view, is this an opportunity for you to make some really positive changes, or is it just an opportunity for you to get your message out about being a particular type of business for your customers?
I agree. I think it is an opportunity for us, and I think it's an opportunity for financial services more broadly. But I think we need to face up to the reality that if we are going to show leadership, it's probably going to cost us money in the short term. And I fear too many financial services companies think that showing leadership is a slick kind of brand campaign, as opposed to making short-term choices that will cost money. Whether it be around fees, whether it be around any number of areas. I think we need to say the real leaders here are ones that are willing to make a short-term hit to their bottom line if it means that it helps their customers. And look, I think you can make the argument that the long-term benefits around customer loyalty and acquisition will pay that back tenfold. But I think this is an enormous opportunity, but the enormous opportunity has to come through progressive action. It can't just come through talk.
Nicole, you said to me not long ago that actually some of the smaller banks in the United States have been showing the way forward, in that they've reacted in a positive way and that they've put their customers first in a way that others have not been able to. I mean, are we actually looking in the wrong place for leadership? Should we be looking to smaller, more local actors as the standard bearer for change in financial services?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the concept of what the pandemic is all about, which is, local and actually within your community, and what change you can make locally and in your community, you by a sudden create a little bit of a counterbalance of the globalization trend, I have to say. And so it's great to see that the community banks actually have really stepped up their game and have been very early on there to support their clients. And I think that's what is it for me, when you talk also about demonstrating leadership in the financial service space, it's about doing the right things. It's about really focusing on your customer. So, I think this is something where, empathy, flexibility, and authenticity is going a long way as a brand. And, as much as marketing and communication can really help to bridge that gap, because as many other reports show, that customers have lost a little bit the faith in, the financial service industry, to be nimble, to be flexible, to be fast, and I think there is an opportunity to step up to the plate. And definitely, I also believe that, when you look at what we are talking about here, which is this experience gap, you can close now the loop and say, yes, I think, change needs to come from everywhere, and change needs to come from local, needs to come from Penn region, needs to come from global. And the more that this community around financial service industry can work together to help actually the economy and the consumers through this pandemic and recover from it, because I think that is what we need to focus on. How can we actually now look forward, in terms of helping our customers to recover from it? And we know that some industry sectors will have it much easier than others to actually recover. So financial services as a service industry sector has it more easier to recover than if you think about hospitality or travel. So our own research at Western Union shows, the ability to adapt will be completely different when you look at different industry sectors. So how are we staying flexible to accommodate and customize this recovery support for everyone? So that, I think, will be where true leadership will be shown.
That's a lovely point to end on. Thank you so much. I'm just going to do a little bit of a summary for everybody who's tuned in. I think it feels to me like there are a number of key things to take away from this discussion. I mean, number one, there's a real opportunity, as we've just been discussing, for financial services brands to take the lead in helping the wider economy through this crisis. We're all looking to governments at the moment for that, and you can see the impact of big government bailout programs that are appearing across the world. But the reality is those programs will end. They will be finite, and at some point, brands, particularly in the financial services space, are going to have to step into that breach and support their own customer bases in dealing with what will be, no doubt, a very difficult, and already is a very difficult, recession that is a result of COVID. In addition, if that's not enough, there's been a rapid transformation in terms of the ways in which your customers and your consumers are accessing your products and services. Everything has shifted to digital. There's been an enormous shift in the way that you connect with your customer base and your customers and your consumers. And as a result, there's a question mark around how you can inject that humanity and that personality into your experience in a way that's compelling and consistent. But that also delivers that real authenticity that Nicole was just talking about. And then in addition, you're thinking about actually, how do I train my staff? How do I support my teams? How do I create the right environment within which my teams feel empowered, as Will and Nicole were saying, to deliver the experience that we think we should be delivering to customers? So I think, going back to Mark Evans's quote, that fusion between brand marketing and customer experience, it is critical now. And if you're not thinking about the gap between what you're saying in your communications and what you're delivering in your experience day to day, and thinking very, very carefully about how you close that gap as much as you possibly humanly can, albeit with constrained budgets right now, then you're going to fall behind, because others will already be thinking like that, and others will already be working to make sure that their experience gaps are as small as humanly possible, so that they can help their customers to succeed in what will be a very difficult time to come. So on that note, I'm going to end and say thank you so much to our fantastic panel. I'm going to bring Helen back just to say a few words about the upcoming program of Financial Services Forum events. So please do let Helen just talk you through what the FSF are going to be doing in the next couple of months.
Thanks very much, Geraint, and a huge thank you to Nicole, Will and John for a fascinating discussion. That was genuinely extremely interesting. I love the thread of humanity actually that went through that, and I think that's perhaps for me one of the big takeaways, that the shift in the public perception about FS brands being these money grabbing or just money making, even if not money grabbing brands. There is actually an opportunity to show that there are people running these businesses who care, and I think that's a really massive opportunity and will impact the customer experience. So thank you. I've written down a whole load of ideas for future events, and you're all very welcome to attend. We continue, even though we would traditionally break for the summer, these times are crazy, so we're not breaking for the summer just yet. We've got a couple more webinars, and we're very excited to announce quite a long-running series of very practical learning webinars around digital marketing called the A to Z of digital marketing. We're running the first one on the 29th of July. You can register for it via the forum website. We follow up with the second one in that same A to Z of digital marketing series on the 19th of August. Then we take a little pause, but we're coming back in September with a retail banking event on the 8th of September. You can see all of our events on our website. At the moment, they will still be virtual. We long to get back to physical events as well, because I still firmly believe it's all about people at the end of the day. And we miss everybody. So we hope to see you in the flesh very soon. But a massive thank you to Clare, Saatchi, to Geraint, who's done all the heavy lifting on this, and to John for a fabulous presentation. We look forward to seeing you all soon. Stay safe.
Thank you, Helen. I'm going to close the stream now and end the session. Thank you to our fantastic audience for coming along, and there will be a recording available very soon. Thank you.